I would like to introduce you to Geoff Ramsey, Chief Evangelist and Insider Intelligence and co-founder of eMarketer. Geoff, look forward to your keynote on traditional TV meets streaming video and how those two worlds are colliding. Thank you again, and the stage is yours.
Thank you. And it's great to be here. I'm actually in New Jersey, although my background would have you believe otherwise. So today we're going to talk about a very exciting topic, something that I'm very passionate about, partly because I watch a lot of streaming television and movies myself, which is where worlds collide, traditional media meets streaming video. I don't have to tell you that streaming has come on big across the globe, and particularly in North America and in the US. And we're not saying that TV is going away by any stretch, but it's certainly taking a banging from all the streaming activity. Let's start by looking at time spent, because it's a critical component of where media dollars go. You want to go where the eyeballs are, where the attention is. And so as we look at just taking one market, and I'm going to take a global look at a lot of the stats that you see here are going to have a global bent to it, looking at specific countries. I wish I could cover every country with every stat, but we don't have time in the 20 minutes allotted. But here's the kicker. If you look just at the US, due to COVID, because of forced isolation, Americans have added 1 hour and 5 minutes to their daily routine of watching media. Now, understand that this includes double counting, because at any given point in time, if I'm multitasking, and who isn't these days, let's say I'm watching a television program on the big screen and I have a smartphone in my hand. Well, we don't know where that attention lies at any given second or nanosecond. So we essentially double count the smartphone time with the television time, and that's why the numbers seem somewhat inflated. But back in November 2019, we estimated that Americans were spending 12.5 hours of their entire days with media, and that went up to 13 hours and 35 minutes in April of 2020, at the peak of the coronavirus. Now, it's important to realize that eMarketer looks at a ton of data, some 3,000 plus sources. And for just this US information alone, looking at time spent, this is based on an analysis of over 3,000 metrics from almost 160 different sources. So it's pretty robust. Now let's take a look at the global view. As we can see, if we look at total time spent across various countries, we see that the United States, we watch a lot of media. And so we're at 13 hours and 35 minutes, but France, the United Kingdom, Canada are also pretty strong. What's really important to realize, though, is that across the board, across just about every country we look at, there are pretty significant increases in time spent with media because of the coronavirus pandemic. Now, your next question might be, so Geoff, where is this growth in media time spent coming from? And it really comes down to two components. Number one, there's more time spent with television. We'll get into that in a second. And then there's more time spent with digital across the board. The two main components within digital is that we're spending more time on our phones. For example, in the United States, we're spending an extra 24 minutes with our mobile phones, even though we're immobilized at home. And of course, we're spending a lot more time streaming. What's going down is traditional media, and that includes newspapers, magazines, radio, and for that matter, outdoor, because so few of us are commuting these days. So if we look at some of the data, we see that in the US, we're spending an extra 9 minutes a day watching television. The reason for that is there's really two countervailing forces here. We're spending way more time with news. Think about COVID, think about the election and all the other stuff going on in our country. And then on the other hand, you have the fact that there's been very little sports up until recently. Then with US time spent with digital, that's increasing even more by about 19 minutes on average. Again, these are on average across the population. Younger folks are going to drive these figures much higher. So now if we look at television across the globe, we see that it's pretty universal with France, India, and Canada, Germany, even ahead of the US and UK in terms of extra minutes spent with television. Now, if we switch gears for a second and we look at growth in minutes spent with digital video, we see that this is also a global phenomenon, with the United States in the lead with an extra 19 minutes, but the United Kingdom, Canada, China, France, Germany, all growing pretty significantly in terms of time spent with streaming. Now, it's important to get a reality check here. Just looking at the US, what we find is that of all the time that we spend with digital video, about 2/3 or 65% in the US goes to traditional TV. That being said, streaming, which is in the black, is growing the fastest, going from 2 hours to more than that over the foreseeable future. And where we take that extra 19 minutes is interesting. Out of the 2 hours that we spend with digital video each day, there's an 11 minutes extra spent with OTT subscription video viewing. Think Amazon Prime Video, think Netflix and Hulu for that matter. And then another hour or so is spent with other kinds of streaming choices, which tend to be on the free side, watching YouTube and so on. We'll get more into those details a little bit later. So let's take a look at that 65% figure. Again, I said that 65% of total video viewing time in the US goes to television. And we find that that's pretty par for the course when you look at other countries, particularly the UK, US, and Canada. Whereas in France and Germany, there's much more propensity to be watching TV on a traditional television set. But again, that will change over time as well. It's also important to note that if you're looking at Gen Z or millennials, their consumption of digital video is over the top. And just to give you a couple of figures, we'll get into this in a second, we will see how significant their usage of streaming is. There is a generational divide in most countries, and including the US, in terms of consumption of digital video. This is looking at percent of the US population that is using digital video at least on a monthly basis. As you can see, 74% across the entire population. Baby boomers, like myself, much more lower penetration at 55%. But then if you look at Gen Z, they're way ahead at 81%. And forget about it when you look at Gen Z and millennials, they're over the top. Here's a couple of other statistics that provide some light on how predominant streaming is with young people. According to Nielsen, almost 100% of 18 to 34-year-olds in the US subscribe to a video on demand streaming service. If we look at this data from COVID, the COVID impact from Havas, we see 45% people are using streaming or live video more, and that is bolstered or corroborated by a Harris poll that found 53% of US adults are using more streaming services due to the pandemic. But now let's switch gears for a second and look at another way of looking at it, which is how much more time are Americans spending with streaming? And what we find is a convergence of results. The Myers report said there's a 45% increase in streaming. That's followed by Caneva, which found a 57% increase. And then we have Nielsen at a 74% increase. And not to be outdone, we find other sources that are even higher. The point is, no matter what data you're looking at, no matter what source, streaming is going way up. So a lot of people are wondering what happens as we move into 2021. Our projections are that traditional TV starts to fall back down, often even to lower levels than pre-COVID. And at the same time, digital media remains at high levels even post-COVID, especially digital video and streaming across many, many different countries. And by the way, if you would like to receive a copy of this presentation so that you can share it with your colleagues and so on, we'd be happy to send that to you later. The main point here is that the increased streaming video consumption trend will continue beyond the pandemic as people become more habitualized to streaming and new streamers, think of older people, start to enter the market. They're no longer going to be satisfied with the traditional means of watching television. Now, this is a critical chart. This is looking at the US. Looking at the US pay TV universe in the black, which we see is shrinking. And when we say pay TV, we're talking about traditional pay TV where you subscribe to satellite or cable, where you're getting hundreds of channels across regular television. Okay, we see those numbers going down. At the same time, with cord cutting and so on, we see that the number of non-pay TV households or traditional pay TV households is going up, such that by 2024, non-pay TV households will actually exceed pay TV households in the US. Now, it's important to keep in mind here that these numbers are not mutually exclusive. In fact, our estimation is that between 65 and 75% of households subscribe to both traditional pay TV and some of the skinnier TV bundles or the streaming services like Netflix and Amazon Prime Video. So they're not mutually exclusive, but the lines are definitely moving towards streaming options. In addition, the number one reason to cut the cord, according to two sources that are pretty lockstep in this, is that it's too expensive. So people are looking to save money on their $100 or $150 cable bill, and they want a skinnier bundle, hand-picking Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, etc. Now, it's important to get our definitions right as we see it at eMarketer. About 2/3 of consumers in the US are over-the-top video viewers, and 2/3 are connected TV viewers. So let's take a closer look at that. And what we find is that when you're looking at connected TV, you're talking about any app or website that essentially provides streaming video and that is by the internet, and it's bypassing traditional TV viewing consumption. Connected TV, on the other hand, is a little bit different. These are TV sets that are connected to the internet, either through something like a smart TV, and any TV you buy today will be a smart TV, or some other kind of connected device, think Apple TV remote or a Roku device. So again, there are about 2/3 of the population subscribe to these, and they're not mutually exclusive. And it is highly fragmented. If we take a quick look at the connected TV marketplace, just as an example, you see that smart TVs are number one as a percent of CTV users. Again, they're not mutually exclusive, but look at Roku and Amazon Fire TV are right behind smart TVs in terms of penetration there for people watching OTT video. If we move ahead, what we see is that the OTT space is also highly fragmented. This is looking at the percent of OTT video viewers that watch OTT video on any particular kind of device. We find that, or subscription service, and YouTube is number one at 95%. That is followed by Netflix, number 2, and then Amazon Prime Video at number 3. Now, if we go to the big number here, which is the 95% for YouTube, that kind of makes sense. YouTube's been around for a while. And most importantly, most of YouTube is free. So a lot of people are going to be going there. But as we look at the data further, we have to keep in mind that the other sources or the other platforms like Netflix, Amazon Prime Video, and for the most part, Hulu and Disney Plus and Apple TV don't have ads. So this is going to be very meaningful for marketers who are trying to reach consumers. They simply can't do it on these channels in the normal way. And by the way, on a daily average, Americans spend more time today with Netflix at about 31 minutes a day than they spend with YouTube. So in terms of time spent, Netflix has got YouTube beat. As we move on, it's also important to know, when you look at all of the time spent streaming on average, this is looking at the US according to Deloitte, paid or subscription video on demand services trump ad-supported free content. The way Deloitte breaks it up is that subscription video on demand, or SVOD, is 71% of time spent with streaming. Again, there are no ads there. And what that means is only 29% is watching free or ad-supported content. That's today. But what we're seeing is that free or ad-supported content like Roku, Amazon Fire, Pluto, and so on are growing rapidly. Roku time spent, as just one example, is growing about almost 40% in 2020. And according to Omnicom Media Group, almost 60% of SVOD subscription streaming is free or ad-supported, or also use streaming or ad-supported content. So in other words, they're not mutually exclusive. Once again, they're both paying for stuff and watching free stuff at the same time. Now, once again, looking at the US, Almost 80% of US households subscribe to at least one online subscription TV service. That's up from 72% pre-pandemic in 2019. What they also said is that the number, or the average number, of streaming services that any household subscribes to went from 3 in 2018 to almost 5 by 2020. Now, this is from Hub Research. Let's just take a closer look to make sure that their numbers are supported by other data. And we had to control for apples to apples. So we looked at the percent of SVOD users who subscribe to 2+ streaming video services. Hub Research's answer to that was 2/3 subscribe to 2+ streaming services. Another source, Morning Consult, came in with a much lower number at 44%, but two other sources, Civic Science and Activate, came in with numbers much closer to Hub Research. So we can guess that about 2/3 of streaming service users are subscribing to 2+ services, and there seems to be room for growth. Looking at it from a money standpoint, as I said, the average American spends about $100, $120 on traditional pay TV with cable or satellite, but the sweet spot for subscription services is to spend about $40 a month or less. And that is substantiated by a whole number of sources, from PC Magazine to KPMG to YouGov. And then finally, with another source, Morning Consult, you'll see that between 71 and 80% are in that sweet spot of about $40 or less. Not every household is at that $40 level yet, so there's still room for more paid subscription services. Now, if we look at the paid services, the subscription video on demand services, it should be no surprise that Netflix is king, at least in the US, at almost 170 million viewers. That is followed in close pursuit by Amazon Prime Video and Hulu. And coming right out of the dark, in not totally out of the dark, but very fast out of the gate, I should say, was Disney Plus, which is also a subscription video on demand service. And we're estimating that they will reach 72 million viewers by the end of this year, which is really astronomical growth. Once again, there's no ads here except for a small tier of Hulu, where you still have to pay to get access to Hulu content. As our analyst said, though Americans are spending more overall minutes per day watching Netflix, people's attention is becoming increasingly divided with all the different streaming services that are emerging. And certainly Netflix has a lot of competition. They've got Apple TVs just starting to gain some traction. Disney Plus is already at 60 million and will be at 72 million by the end of this year. Then you've got HBO Max, just kind of getting going. And then, of course, there's a relatively free version with NBC Universal's Peacock. Again, it's mostly free, but it has an ad-supported option. And then, of course, there's Quibi, which we thought was not going to last very long. And certainly there was not much time left for them. They just they put $1.75 billion into that business, and it bit the dust. So we're going to see more of a shakeout. As we close up, looking at CTV spending, okay, this is where you can actually advertise on streaming content. We're saying in the US it will pass the 8 billion mark in 2020. That's equal to almost a quarter of total video ad spend at about 35 billion in the US. It's going to almost double from 8 billion to roughly 16 billion in the time period. So that is very, very significant growth. But then we also have to look at, if you can advance the slides, please. There we go. Catching up. Sorry, I'm going through this very rapidly. We find that Hulu and YouTube, by the way, and Roku thrown in together equal 52% of the market. And as our analyst, Eric Hegstrom, recently said, these are all growing fast, these free options. But the all other category, including Amazon Prime, TV Everywhere, and mid-form content players like Zumu, Pluto, and Tubu are also growing very fast. So the free versions of these platforms are growing very rapidly. If we look at CTV ad spending, significant growth at 27% in 2020, but there's a bunch of obstacles holding it back. The number one obstacle, if you can advance the slides, the number one obstacle is the fact that the biggest players like Disney Plus, Netflix, HBO Max, and Amazon Video have no ads. So there's no opportunity for advertisers to be there, and there's no dollars flowing through. The other problems are that with connected TV, it still lacks the mass time in terms of in terms of video consumption. Remember, traditional TV in the US is about 2/3 of video viewing time. There's also fragmentation of inventory and the fact that only 56% of connected TV inventory is bought programmatically versus over 80% of all digital video ad spending. In addition, there's integration, technology, and measurement issues. We still don't have the equivalent of a cookie to measure across both all of these online choices, not to mention the offline choices. So measurement is a real challenge here. If you can advance, thank you. Measurement can't get to the next level until it catches up with consumer behaviors, both online and offline channels. In a digital age where audiences and ads are flying across TVs, smartphones, tablets, and other connected devices, the fact is, in order to reach these audiences, brands are going to have to work with makers of streaming devices. They're going to have to work with TV manufacturers, content aggregators, broadcast networks, and a whole form of other streaming services. So it's really complicated, and we're going to have to roll up our sleeves. As Linda Yaccarino, very significant person in the TV market at NBC. She says we have to move as quickly as possible to audience-based measurement across all screens, just like we're doing on digital. And there's not going to be one single source measurement company that does it, AKA a Nielsen. As our other analyst has said, we're going to have to develop proxy measures to figure out how to put all of this together so we know online and offline where the consumer is going, and we can put things together in a way that we can follow the consumer and we can build up those dollars. And with that, if we could advance the slides, I think we're at the end of the presentation, and I want to thank you very much for listening. And I'm sorry that the audio wasn't working at the very beginning of this, but again, if anybody would like a copy of this deck, I would be very happy to send it to you. Just let me know, and we will send you a copy of the presentation. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed the show.
Jeff, thank you for the insightful presentation. Definitely huge implications. I was fascinated to hear that we spent half of our day on media in TV. That's incredible. So
again, that includes double counting where we're multitasking, but yes.
It's unbelievable. I think that explains a lot on why and what's happening right now in this part of the world. Thank you, Jeff.